there was a change that everyone was tapping their toes to. They could dance to the beat of the revolution taking over America. They called it the Jazz Age, and they were jazzing things up. Jazz inspired a change in people and the culture it surrounded, taking root in New Orleans and eventually spreading all across the globe. Jazz music still enthralls the music of today. In this, we will explore the marvelous Great Revolution that formed the vast genres we have today. The startup of jazz is known to have begun in New Orleans, now renowned for music and celebration. Once jazz flew from New Orleans, it traveled up north to New York. Jazz musicians were leaving their mark on America. The early 19th century held a lot of racial tension in the South, but jazz was allowing those oppressed colored men and women to free themselves just a bit more. It was tearing down musical and cultural barriers with each note that was played. There, in New York, sprung up one of the most famous jazz clubs of the time, the Cotton Club. They held performances every night with a diverse amount of musicians and dancers. Flappers took their stride, setting off a women's revolution as well. These dancers would flood the floors, suited up in fancy short dresses that showed their feminist uprising starting. The musicians came from far and wide, including Louis Armstrong, Benny Kelly, and Don Costello, along with other jazz-oriented bands. It was constantly packed and constantly jamming. New Orleans produced a great number of talented jazz artists, such as Jelly Roll Morton. He is famous for Smokehouse Blues and the Black Bottom Stomp. He traveled much of the U.S. and spread his talent from New York to Los Angeles. Mr. Morton was born in New Orleans and began learning how to play the piano at the age of 10. Not much is known about his musical training except for his youthful influence being Tony Jackson. In 1926, Morton was recording with his Red Hot Peppers, a 7 to 8 piece band organized for recording purposes. It was comprised of knowledgeable colleagues in the New Orleans jazz style and Jolly's own compositions. In 1928, Morton moved to New York. He continued his music and recorded pieces like Glow Gravy and Blue Blood Brothers. He gradually made use of modern devices as homophonically harmonized ensembles and laid a greater emphasis on solo improvisation. Early 1930s is where he drifted into mystery, settling in Washington, D.C., and managing a small jazz club where he sometimes performed. In 1938, Morton's biographer, Alan Lomax, recorded him in an extensive series of interviews held at the Library of Congress, recalling his early upbringing in jazz and the start of the Jazz Age. King Oliver, another jazz artist that rose to stardom with hits such as Canal Street Blues, Dipper Mouth Blues, and Sobbin' Blues. He has been said to start off as a trombonist and played in brass bands, dance bands, and various groups in New Orleans bars and cabinets in 1907. In March 1919, the King left for Chicago to join clarinetist Lawrence Dew's band and legendary bassist Bill Johnson. Later on, he became head of Dew's, playing steady gigs at Perkin Cabaret and Dreamland until 1921. He traveled to San Francisco but returned to Chicago and started an engagement